in there. Well, I tell you, the drive must have been 20 minutes. She didn't stop. She recounted everything, like she had it all hung up in the closet, and she took them down one after the other. And she recounted these things, and he was saying, we got to their house on Bradley Street, and helped her out, got her in, and he took her upstairs, and so she was still talking, still going on. And then he said, okay, now, he said, we can go back to the lab. We got in the car, drove back. And I had a couple of other incidents I think I can share with you. I think there are a few things that maybe better left unsaid, but one time he told me to come for breakfast. He wanted something to talk. It was about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. And his voice was coming from upstairs. The housekeeper let me in. And she's saying to him, Terry is saying to him, you can't wear that tie with this suit. That's terrible. I won't let you leave this house with that tie. And he's saying, I love this tie. I want to wear this tie. And that went on for a while. And then there was a great silence. And then I hear his voice say, okay, you're satisfied now? Obviously he put on. And she said, that's exactly the right tie for that. Then he came downstairs. And we had a cup of coffee before he left. And the devil in me wanted to say, oh my, isn't that a beautiful tie? But discretion was the better part of valor. I didn't make that comment, although I was just on the verge of doing it, I mean, you didn't really want to push him too far because he could really get angry. So. Another time he had me over in the morning, and he had gotten these two bull mastiff dogs, puppies. And they were about 7, 8 months old, maybe 9 months old. And they're big, big dogs. And they have boundless energy, particularly, these are kind of like puppies at that age. And so he was having such a problem with them that he sent them off to, what shall we say, boarding school in Connecticut for a couple of months to get trained. And he had just gotten them back, and he was very proud of that. So he said, I want to show you the training that these dogs have. So he had this great big kitchen. So he has the dogs at one end of the kitchen, and we're at the other end of the kitchen. And I said, I'm going to show you, when I say stay, they want to come to me, want to come. When I say stay, they're going to stay. Okay, fine, I'm an observer. So the dogs said, stay, And they're wiggling around, he's very proud of them. But one thing they didn't teach them at this boarding school for dogs was, when one of the two dogs got so excited that he proceeded to let loose a massive diarrhea. He was so excited, boom, and Lance stood there, but they stayed, they didn't come. And Lance said, let's go in the dining room. So he closed the door behind me, went in there, had a cup of coffee, and work. And somebody else had to, do the job in the kitchen. That's the way things are. Well, and another side, the personal side was, there was a group among the officers. If I could use the analogy, it was, and I hope Dr. Lamb will forgive me for this. It was like Frank Sinatra and his buddies, I mean, they were like a group. And they hung out together, they did stuff together, they went to dinner, they played poker at night, shall we say guy stuff, that sort of thing. They drank cocktails together, whatever. The group consisted of Bill McCune, of course, Otto Wolf, Charlie McCulka, and Elkin Blau. Now, Elkin left Polaroid in the 1950s, but he stayed close with this group and close with Land, and he was actually one of my predecessors as Director of Chemical Research, and he went on to professorship at Harvard. He'd come back a lot, and he and Land continued to have a close relationship. And Dr. Land used to every now and then buy a car. But one thing he didn't do is he never sold a car. So he had a barn behind his house on Broad Street. And in that car were all the cars that he ever owned, you know. And every once in a while he had another one. And he'd drive them from time to time, but you know, that just was his, you know, one of his indulgences. Elkin Blount had developed a passion for Land's Buick convertible. He really wanted that convertible for some reason or other. And he offered to buy it from Land refused. One morning I'm in Land's office, we're talking about something, and he says, excuse me for a moment. He gets his assistant to get Elkin Blount on the phone. He says, Elkin? He says, do you still want that Buick convertible? And I hear a loud voice in the back, and then, yes. He says, okay. He said, bring a check, and he named the amount of X thousand dollars, you know. He said, bring a check over here, and I'll give you the key, and the car's yours. Well, within 20 minutes, Elkin comes running in the door, you know, and he's got the check, and he gives Land the check. Land gives him the keys, and Elkin says, well, where's the car? And Land says, it's in Central Square where it broke down this morning. You know, those were the kinds of things they sort of did with each other. And I'd like to tell you another little tale about Dr. Land was he had the quickest mind on the planet. And he could come up with phrases and answers to things, you know, in a flash. So, you know, just to set the stage a little bit, Kodak has introduced their SX70 type camera. One of our people went to New York to the presentation, brought back a camera and some film, and a bunch of us are sitting in the boardroom on the third floor, 549 Tech Square, and Dr. Land is part of the group. And the guy who brought it back demonstrates the camera. Now, just to, again, set the stage a little bit, they used a 4 AA alkaline pack battery in the camera, not in the film pack. So it was reusable for packet to back. But because it had a lot of capacity, but because it was 4 batteries, it had a high impedance. So it could only deliver the current at a relatively low rate compared to our flat pack battery, you know, which had much more surface area and was much more zippy. So in any event, he observes how the Kodak camera delivers the film. Comes out, okay. And then, you know, by contrast, we're taking some pictures of our camera, you know. And so the marketing guy says to Land, he says, what do you think is the principal difference between their system and our system? He looked at it and he said, well, he says, it's pretty obvious. He says, theirs evacuates and ours ejaculates. I don't know anybody else who could come up with a, you know, with an answer like that. But, that was sort of a typical of this wonderful man. And then, of course, let's say one story about our working relationship, which almost did in the end. You remember the whole, those of you who were there at the time, the whole advance of the SX70 project on every front you can think of, you know, on the negative front, the camera front, the film assembly front, the coating of the positive sheet, et cetera, We had, in the chemical group, we succeeded in making the chemicals necessary for the negative and for the reagent, except we didn't have a functional opacifier. Now, I could spend a lot of time telling you how hard it was to do this opacifier thing, the way Land designed the system. You know, this film, this pictures were taken and called impossible. This was really impossible. We had no clue as to how to put something in the reagent that would completely protect the film and then disappear and be stored for a year in that hostile environment. No clue. We had help. We had two Nobel Prize winners in organic chemistry as consultants. We had Bob Woodward from Harvard and Derek Barton from Great Britain. And they reviewed it with us and the 150 ideas we had, and they just shook their head, we don't see any way to get this done, to do it. Meanwhile, I was, as the head of the chemistry group, at that point, rapidly becoming the biggest skunk at the picnic imaginable. Everyone was investing their time and energy, and this product wasn't going to go to market until we had a pacifier. So it was tough. It was very, very tough. Okay, and then so some of the camera big shots and the negative big shots and all the other big shots are all pointing their finger at me. They agree on one thing, they agree on that. And there was a confrontation in Land's office about we have to redesign the system, we're never going to have a pacifier and so forth. And Land said, we are going to have a pacifier. This chemical group is going to solve the problem. And he threw his arm around it. And he continued to do that. He was the only person that wasn't worried. Something magic happened. We didn't believe we could do it. We were certain we couldn't. But he, the greatest genius on the planet, believed we could do it. And somehow that infiltrated us. And we found a way to do it. There's no way in heaven or earth that we would have succeeded in that task if it weren't for his confidence that he had in us. And he really laid it on the line because the company had invested hundreds of millions of dollars and so forth. And the solution we came up with was not the most complex one in the world. It was a little complex and all that. And he said to me then, another one of his great phrases, he said, there's no such thing as genius. He says, and he points out to the pacifier, and he said, all there is the cessation of stupidity. So, okay, I'll take that. I really will. And then as a reward, the batteries were all leaking in the RAVAC program, and then he signed me that program. To struggle with for a while, and all the rest of it. So, those were great days and the like. And Eric, I have one more story to tell if I have enough time. Do I have it?
Sure.
Okay. This is, I'm going to repeat a story now that someone else told. I'm going to repeat it because it's the greatest story ever told at Polaroid. Now, just to set the stage for it, we had a wonderful, sweet guy in personnel, as it was called back in those days, in the 1960s, 1970s, a fellow named Phil McDonald. Now, how many people here remember Phil McDonald? I see a few hands going up. Yeah, he's a wonderful man. One of Phil's characteristics was he stuttered. And some days it was really bad. It was hard for him to get anything out. But we loved the guy, and there wasn't anything he wouldn't do for you if he could do it. He was that sweet a person. So anyway, Phil is returned, right? And as you know, there's a great deal of stories about where did the idea from instant photography come from. And you hear various versions of it. Even Land had a version of it, which I can tell you is not the authentic goods. Nobody really knows. I mean, many of us have a suspicion, including me, but put that aside. And he lived his life as an inventor and all the rest of it, and they had this grand house in Cambridge. And Phil is retiring. And some people got up and they made tributes to Phil. Heartfelt tributes, because he was that sweet a guy. And then it was Phil's turn to get up and answer. And Phil got up to speak. And an amazing thing happened. He didn't stutter. He gave his speech without stuttering even once. And Phil said, and I'm not repeating his words, he said, "You all know me here for a long time. I've been here in personnel. You know I try to be helpful. But basically, my job is to do relatively simple and routine things, you know, checking people out, making sure their benefits are right, making sure they get paid right, and if they have problems, to help them solve and all the rest of it. So, you know, you all love good old Phil. But up to now, you don't know one thing about Phil McDonald that I'm going to disclose to you this afternoon." And this was taking place in a big room at 750 Main Street. There were about 200 people in the room. And he said, "I made a contribution, a singular contribution to this company that is the most powerful one that's ever been made. It's resulted in an opportunity for you to have jobs and for this company to grow and all that goes with it." So we're all sitting there, because he was speaking in a very serious way, you know. Ooh, couldn't imagine what comes next. He said, "Many years ago," this was actually, he said, in April of 1945, "I was out on a Sunday afternoon in Cambridge. It was warm. I was walking down Broughton Street. I was having a stroll. I noticed up ahead that a man, obviously a father, was taking pictures of his daughter, you know, right close to the street where their stone wall was. And as I approached him, he looked at the camera, obviously out of film, went back in the house, obviously to get another roll of film. And he said, and then so I approached this little girl,